Well, hello everyone. Greetings. So, it is a light source over my head, not a halo. While I have a good opinion of myself in general, I definitely do not consider myself holy. Welcome to Advanced Fiction. So, many of you I've had in class, some of you I have not, and I'm looking forward to meeting and working with all of you as you kind of culminate your year with a more workshop oriented advanced fiction course. So my name is Maya Jeffra, and this is the my first year at Central Washington. I'm also finishing up my third quarter with you all, and I have taught in advanced creative nonfiction, fiction itself, and I'm also one of the faculty advisors for Monastash. So lots going on. This quarter, this class is very much building upon skill sets that you have learned at once in your creative writing course, but really built off of fiction writing. In the fiction writing class 364, we explored a lot of elements of fiction: plot, character, setting, dramatic tension. And we are, of course, going to explore those elements in this class as well. However, because we have already established those, those elements and you are familiar with them since you all have taken that course, we're going to build off of them in a more complex way. So, as many of you know, this is a layered undergraduate and graduate workshop based course. It's for advanced writers of fiction, and inspired it inspires students to write and revise. So, to take all of the elements of creative writing that you have learned, even within poetic elements and creative nonfiction elements, certainly fiction elements, and applying them all to this very focalized workshop. I'm sounding a little repetitive, but I'm just making sure I'm clear enough here. We are going to be doing review and discussion of published stories, of course, but we're also going to be doing writing exercises, and really, we're emphasizing most prioritizing your own work and the workshop experience. And I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. So, discussing process of writing is going to be vital in this course, even though you've probably done it in all of them. And we are also going to be considering how to assemble collections of short fiction, as well as cultivating tools for novel writing. So that's where this course is kind of passing or grabbing the baton that fiction writing is passing, where we focused on elements of craft, we did a little bit of workshop, and we did a lot of writing exercises. In this course, we're doing a lot of workshop, some writing exercises, and of course, discussing craft, but not necessarily focusing on extolling the various virtues of the craft. We're instead going to think about it more holistically and apply them in our discussions. With that in mind, we're also going to be reading texts a little different. For those of you who took my fiction course, you know that we looked at a ton of various short fiction writers, and we were all over the gamut. But we would just take single stories from these various authors and examine them. Now, partly that was just to ensure that we were getting a multiplicity of experience so that we could see fiction coming from many different styles and points of view, perspectives, identities, so that we didn't historicize a single kind of craft element as being good fiction. That indeed, good fiction is fiction writing that inhabits its own rules in a successful way and conveys meaning and emotional impact. So, craft is a relative entity. And I know I talk about that in all my courses. But in this one, we are going to read more so full length texts, two short story collections, and a novel. The short story collections are Jaime Cortez's Gordo, which is a wonderful collection of shorts, all linked together by place, that came out from Grove Atlantic last year. And I happened to review this book for the San Francisco Chronicle. And you'll see, it's a wonderful example of point of view, of establishing setting in short fiction. And all around, it examines characters from a socioeconomic, um, a socioeconomically disadvantaged place, specifically a migrant worker camp in the Central Valley, Central Coast in California. So it's largely made up of undocumented and documented immigrants who are working on those farms. But you'll see it is laden with pathos. We are also going to read um, Nana Kwame Adjei Friday Black, which is a powerful collection of fiction that utilizes speculative, fantastical, and surreal elements in order to evoke themes about violence in America, about race, about class, and about gender. Um, whereas Gordo has a lot of humor kind of fused into it, Friday Black has a biting commentary upon American culture. Speaking of biting commentary on American culture, but done so in quite an absurd way, is the third book we're going to be reading for the class. It's Ling Ma's Severance, which many people have said is kind of like the first Bible for the millennials. um, it is a dystopian novel set in a post pandemic world, specifically the United States, but it's really a meditation on capitalism and the kind of labor ethic um, that was inspired by the Protestant ethic, but then becomes very much a stamp of American society. It also has a lot of funny moments in it as well, though. And I chose these three books because they are all the author's debut collections. Um, and in Ling Ma's case, debut novel, but debut books. All of them studied creative writing at various institutions, and all of them within the last 3 years have published their first books. So we are at once looking at debut fiction books to inspire you as to what can happen, while also examining this kind of these fresh texts that very much have just entered into the creative conversation in our field. And so hopefully by reading these contemporaneous texts, we get a sense of the pulse of literature in America at this moment. I'm really excited for you to read these. Obviously, I selected them because I think they're all strong and they're very different. They add a little bit of elements of all things that you probably have discussed in your creative writing classes, and they vary in their taste, in their style, in their content. I'm excited. In addition to that, those primary texts, we are also going to become much more familiarized with Liz Lerman's critical response process or critical response model for workshop. So we're actually going to read her what we call the CRP. We're going to read the first 4 chapters of the book that she published in 2003 on the critical response process. And we're going to discuss it and utilize it as inspiration for the workshops that we do in the class, which leads to my next kind of major point. I am really hoping that we can have synchronous workshop in small cohort groups of 5 each. The reason for this is I really think it's important for all of you, no matter what the modality of your study is, to have the experience of live workshop. And if we can't physically all be in one place, because of course we're part of an online program, we can at least utilize the wonders of technology to allow us to do so. So many of you are already aware and have already responded, but I sent out an email to all of you as well as posted an announcement in our Canvas shell for the course and requested that you choose one of the 3 time slots for the very first set of cohort critiques. Once you all reply to that, I'm going to be able to assemble those cohorts. And from there, we are actually going to schedule 4 critique dates over the course of the quarter so that everyone in this class will experience workshop for 2 um, works in progress of fiction. I was going to say short stories, but of course, you can also submit excerpts for novels in this course. So that is the goal. So I think it's just a handful of you who have not yet responded to the announcement or the email. Could you please do so as soon as you can? And once I have that, we'll assemble ourselves into our cohorts. And then in week 4, when we begin to workshop, we'll be ready to go. Or week 3. This is intro week. Oh, I get so confused with numbers. The way that we're going to be assessing the course, well, is kind of fourfold. Okay? One, of course, we're going to be submitting 2 formal drafts of fiction that we intend to be workshopped within our cohort. So that is one. These fiction drafts will be accompanied by intention statements. And as many of you know, because you've had me in a class, we always submit an intention with our drafts as a way to direct or lead or facilitate the feedback that we get so that people who review our work consider the intention statement and make suggestions and observations that serve that intention. So it's very important for the writer who is submitting to try to wrap their heads around what that intention is. It's vital so that we can give fair and deliberate and useful feedback on our works in progress. Related to that are the peer responses. For all of the fiction that we review in our cohort, we are not only going to meet them in a live format, hopefully, cross fingers, we are also going to be writing written responses to their work to help inform and deepen the inquiry that is related not only to the intention of the writer, but also to the workshop, the live workshop that we perform. And that'll make more sense as we go along in the quarter. And of course, we're going to be performing exercises in the class. Writing exercises that could be developmental towards our works in progress that we submit, the formal fiction works that become workshopped, or they can be one offs that are unrelated to those more formal works, but that help us just cultivate some ideas to adhere to craft elements or to improve upon craft considerations. These are low stakes. They are not reviewed, they are merely a chance for you to generate material. And once again, they might contribute to the more formal submissions for workshop, the works in progress, we'll call them, or they're just practice, right? We have to work out in order to build those muscles. And not all the material that we write necessarily becomes something that reveals itself as public. And that's what low stakes exercises are for. Not to be evaluated, merely to provide opportunity for you to sharpen your skills. Then, of course, we have a final portfolio that is accompanied with revision statements of the two works in progress that we formally workshop in class. All right, that comprises our course. It is much more focalized than the prerequisite fiction writing. It concentrates solely on these works in progress, or primarily on these works in progress, and perfecting our ability to respond to work with clear observation and suggestion that serves a writer's intentions. All right. You can look at the syllabus and all the goodness on there. If you have any questions about the syllabus, you can reach out to me. But it should be pretty clear. This week is intro week, and the weekly breakdown of classes obviously will correspond to what is on Canvas. Of course, most of the readings will be in actual physical book form, the three books that I mentioned. Anything that we are reading in addition, however, I will have digitized and uploaded to the Canvas shell. And you'll notice that the modules are broken up by the week with kind of clearly demarcated required readings, assignments. Sometimes I'll throw supplemental material in there. And of course, the lecture that I will present for the week, just kind of creating an overview for the week based on elements that we will discuss, but more so about process. And of course, correlating that to sometimes discussion exercises that relate to the readings that we are exposed to, other times for developmental purposes towards creating our more formal fiction works in progress. Ooh, everything sounds very wordy right now. I hope that I'm making sense. In the syllabus, I also have when major projects, the works in progress themselves, and the peer reviews are due. And that, of course, is also clarified in Canvas. So use the written syllabus in tandem with the Canvas materials, so you should be able to follow along clearly. I think it's pretty clear, but if you have any questions about anything in the Canvas shell, on the syllabus, you are welcome to reach out to me. So this week, we are focusing not on creative work yet for our readings. I am asking you right away to start thinking about process and to reflect on your own process in relation to what other professional writers have written about. So I'm asking you to read Donald Barthelme, an amazing, innovative fiction writer, his essay called Not Knowing, which is kind of a practice that he presents in the way that he writes his fiction. And then in addition, coming from LitHub, we have Lincoln Michaels on the many different engines that power a short story, which is another meditation on the process of writing fiction. I'm asking you to negotiate these two uh, writers and their ideas about their fiction practice. And in your introduction to us, you're also kind of ruminating on what they talk about and relating your own writing practice, your own developing writing practice, to what these two writers are saying about the process as well. So it's kind of like you're in conversation with Bartholomew and Michael and giving us some insight about the way you so far have figured out the way to write for yourself. We're sharing these because there is no one way to be a fiction writer. There is no one way to be a writer. Stephen King says that he designates the mornings, every morning, to writing. Well, we all don't have that luxury. One, you're in school and you're probably juggling a job and love interests and, you know, contemplating self and its relation to the world. So it's kind of hard to carve out a particular amount of time every day to write. Maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you wake up and write for 45 minutes. Maybe some of you write when inspiration strikes. Maybe some of you, like me, require the whole day to have no commitments, even if I just write for 45 minutes, which isn't very efficient. Maybe some of you write at a coffee shop. Maybe some of you write in an abandoned cabin that does not have running water. Maybe some of you can only write in the closet in your bedroom. We're thinking about process. We're thinking about the way writers write and maybe be inspired by some of the suggestions that either Bartholomew and Michael, or maybe me, or maybe your colleagues evince to you. Maybe something will strike your fancy and you try to apply it for yourself. Process is relative, much like craft, much like good, bad literature. It really is only designated through a series of internal rules that we establish in order to manifest. And that's what makes writing fiction so damn hard and so damn fun, because it does not exist in any kind of institutional designation. Creativity, we have to apply our own constraints. And so that's where we're starting with this particular course. We're going to look at process this week. Then afterwards, we're going to explore critical response, Liz Lerman method, as well as Felicia Rose Chavez's anti-racist writing workshop method, combining them together to discuss how to evaluate works in progress, how to respond to developmental work in a way that is best suited to make it something that the writer wants it to be. Starting with those, and then we'll jump into reading fiction and meditating on the strategies that the writers use, thinking about the way they've assembled their short fiction collection or have created the structure and plot for their novel. We will think about these larger kind of assemblages of fiction, because many of you are probably on your way to eventually having a book developed if you haven't already. And that's what we're doing this quarter. So, for this week, jump into reading Bartholomew and Michael, and then respond to the intro week discussion, which is partly just you introducing yourself to us, a little bit of maybe sharing some writers that you're loving right now so that we can create a reading list. I know I always grab these suggestions from students, and when I get time, I start kind of piling up the literature that you all suggest. And then, of course, reflect on the process essays by Bartholomew and Michael and how you negotiate with them, what it makes you consider, what what ideas come to mind as a result of reading those. You can share this in the form of a video or in writing, either way, but please post it in the appropriate spot in the module. And then, of course, begin to engage with one another. So, most of these discussion exercises will have an initial post component, but then also an opportunity for you all to engage with one another because we need to do that. If we're going to be a group of writers discussing writing, we want to make sure that we're doing it with one another and not just in a vacuum. So we want to engage in conversations around process, around craft. We want to share our ideas with one another, get feedback for those ideas, and then of course ultimately to perform workshop feedback for the fiction works in progress that we want to turn in. We have a little bit of time for that. In the meantime, get hot on this discussion exercise. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. The syllabus has my cell phone on it. You can also reach me via email. Many of you know I am very willing and privy to Zoom chats with you all. My office hours are open ended depending on times that we can negotiate with one another. But as you know, I will prioritize time with you. So, any questions that you have, feel free to reach out in any of those ways. Until then, enjoy these process essays. Let's start thinking about ideas for fiction work that we want to turn in, and let's get hot. I look forward to working with you all.